My friends, there are more and more alarming reports coming from the front. And you know the situation is serious when I get a fresh cut. A Ukrainian soldier of the Aidar battalion wrote the following on Telegram. Today is the apocalypse in the Pokrovsk direction. There's no better way to put it. We're gonna focus on this part of the front on the western side of Avdiivka. What happened in the last few days is an unmitigated disaster for the Ukrainian army.
Leave me alone!
That was a frontline situation on the 1st of June. Then fast forward a month to the 1st of July. And that's the situation now in early August. The Russians literally advanced 12 kilometers in that direction, 9 kilometers in this one, and 6 kilometers there. So in this video, I will analyze in detail how the Russian army managed to carry out this offensive both from a tactical and operational perspective. The main reason behind this military debacle can be attributed to negligence. Complete negligence. We all remember how Ukraine bragged about building a powerful line of fortifications. Yet in reality, in so many sectors of the front, Ukrainian commanders did not bother to build any fortifications. And when they did, these fieldworks ended up being fully exposed and poorly planned out. In the end, the Ukrainian army could not rely on a defense in depth. The moment the first line of defense crumbles, it's GG well played.
Madness and stupidity.
But there's more to this story, and I will talk about it later in the video. Since all the Ukrainian units composed of conscripts with little training could do nothing to stop the Russians, Ukraine decided to sacrifice once again the elite NATO-trained 47th Mechanized Brigade, throwing their precious Bradleys and Abrams left and right to put down the fire. And let me tell you, this came at a heavy cost. Forbes reported the Russians are beating back the Ukrainian 47th Mechanized Brigade and marching on Pokrovsk. As you can see on the map, forward elements of the Russian army are only 16.5 kilometers away from that strategic city. Even worse, in the last 24 hours alone, Ukraine lost 3 villages right in front of Pokrovsk. I'm really starting to think that the Russians are using some type of cheat codes. Welcome to History Legends, and here are the latest news of the Russo-Ukrainian war. If you're new to this channel, make sure to like and subscribe. As you know, some of my Ukraine videos have been targeted with limited or no ads. So make sure to check out my Patreon or PayPal to keep the show running. Thank you to everyone that has already helped, and welcome to the headquarters. In order to get the full picture of what's actually going on, we have to go back to early June. At that point in time, Ukrainian defenses were established along the line Novoselivka, Sokil, and Novoselivka Persha. The 110th Mechanized Brigade was holding the sector of Novoselivka and protected the road linking Pokrovsk to Konstantinivka. The 100th Mechanized Brigade protected the northern flank to prevent a Russian offensive towards Konstantinivka. Lastly, the 47th Mechanized Brigade held the line near Sokil. They had to defend the largest portion of the front by themselves. Their presence was critical, as their mission was to stop the Russians from reaching the important logistic hub of Pokrovsk. Although the 47th Mechanized Brigade faced a shortage of trained riflemen, they compensated this with their firepower by launching their M2A2 Bradleys and M1 Abrams in hit-and-run fire missions. Overall, the Ukrainian command probably hoped to stall the Russian offensive along the Vovcha river, just like they managed to do in the sector of Karlivka, where Russian progression is extremely slow, mainly due to all these bottlenecks. Now, let's just say the Russians are not really into foreplay and they just shoved it in. That's how by the 9th of June, Russian infantry units stormed Novoselivka and controlled half the settlement. Allegedly, this sector is also defended by units of the 111th Territorial Defense Brigade. This clearly means the Ukrainian line of defense is actually a patchwork of various units. After this tactical success, the Russian battle plan was to converge towards Novoselivka Persha, both from Novopokrovsk and from Umansk from the south. If Russian motorized units got pinned down in the sector of Umansk, they managed to capture Novopokrovsk by the 12th of June. Keep that in mind while we go back to Novoalexandrivka. Due to the importance of this axis, the Ukrainians probably sent a lot of reserve units to plug the gaps. So the Russians attempted to flank enemy positions by storming this 1,300 meter long tree line. By the 15th of June, the Russian army had greatly expanded its area of control in the sector of Novoalexandrivka. Overall, these constant attacks seem to have put a lot of strain on the Ukrainian 47th Mechanized Brigade. They had no other choice to trade space for time. On June 15th, forward elements of the Russian army reached the eastern outskirts of Sokil. 2 days later, after a daring attack, they advanced 1,600 meters north of the settlement. If you wonder how they achieved this on a tactical level, here's a glimpse of the operation. In this video, we see a Russian BMP push at full speed towards an open field until it reaches this tree line. There it disembarked its infantry component and rotated out the first group back to the rear. Using a 3D map, we understand Russian motorized units are based in Ocheretine. It is from this central position that they will attack across the entire front. Now in regards to the BMP, to accomplish its mission, it drove 4 kilometers along this exact itinerary. Apart from rotations, BMPs are also essential to provide assault squads with direct and powerful fire support. On the 21st, Russian assault detachments got their first foothold inside Sokil. By the 23rd, they secured this entire 1.7 kilometer long tree line and half the village. At last, after days of battle, on the 28th of June, the Russians finalized the capture of Sokil. This soldier belongs to the Black Hussars detachment of the 15th Motor Rifle Brigade, which we already covered in the past. They were the ones that captured Berdyishi, and we can believe they moved like this along the following axis. Now, from an operational perspective, Novoalexandrivka and Sokil were under Russian control. But the Ukrainians still controlled Novoselivka Persha, the last of these 3 strongholds. Little war game, if you had been a Ukrainian commander, where would you have positioned your reserves? Do you maintain them near Vozdvizhenka to protect the supply lines going to Kostiantynivka? Or do you try to halt the Russian offensive head on? It seems the Ukraine command picked option 1. By the 2nd of July, the Russians did not allow the Ukrainians to reform their ranks and just continue their cavalry charge. They completely shoved away the Ukrainian units in front of them and advanced 3 kilometers right in between Novoalexandrivka and Sokil. Are we surprised though? This is the type of half-assed trenches Ukrainian soldiers have to sit in. It's pathetic. No wonder why the front is falling apart. If things could not go worse, the next day Russian motorized units pushed 3.5 kilometers in between Sokil and Novoselivka Persha. This was disastrous for the Ukrainian defenders because all the troops in Novoselivka now faced encirclement. Now this is the part where the Russians spanked many Ukrainian Bradleys. Like this one that was destroyed west of Novopokrovsk, or this one that was also destroyed by an enemy FPV drone. You'll see throughout this video it's a recurrent theme, but the Ukrainians didn't have many strongholds west of Sokil available to stop any Russian breakthrough. Literally, when the Russian tanks passed the first set of trenches, it was a free-for-all. Actually, there were the settlements of Vovche and Yevhenivka. These places were so small you can literally count the houses one by one. In this video, you can see the settlement of Vovche, essentially a 600 meter long street with a farm complex at the end. It didn't take long before the first Russian rifleman advanced towards the entrance of Vovche. However, this Russian soldier doesn't seem to notice this Ukrainian drone flying around him like a mosquito, and then boom! Like US paratroopers say, what a hell of a way to die. During the defense of the village, Ukraine left behind 3 M2 Bradleys and 1 M1A1 Abrams. In the end, Vovche fell on the 3rd of July. These soldiers recording a video are part of the 2nd Battalion of the 10th Guard Separate Motorized Rifle Brigade. They say how they captured the village with the help of the Cossack Battalion Terek and the South Ossetian Battalion of Volunteers Sarmat. On their battle flag we see the number 30, perhaps for Atriat Storm, so the 30th Detachment of Stormtroopers, surrounded by the words courage, faith, honor, and truth. with the call signs of 14 members of the squad. With that being said, I think the soil around Umanske was cursed with fields of soy because zero gains were made there. However, a bit to the north, the Russians played Tetris and went from one tree line to another and eventually reached this reservoir behind Novoselivka Persha by the 6th of July. The one-street village of Yevhenivka was now literally inside a pincer. I think it was not defended by more than a platoon of riflemen. Just like the 47th Mechanized Brigade did so often, they rushed their M2A2 Bradleys forward and fired at the enemy at point blank and then pulled them out. For example, this one drove out from Vovche along this road and started firing with the 25mm chain gun at the Russians at a distance of about 200 meters. Now when we look at the footage, we can see the M2A2 Bradley right here, but notice the trench bastions positioned on each side of the road. It's actually massive. I was surprised. It's not something you often see on this part of the front. So that would mean the Ukrainian riflemen were probably not holding the settlement proper, but rather positioned their fire teams behind the village in this fortified trench network. However, these Ukrainian hit-and-run attacks also come at a risk, like this M2M2 Bradley, soon targeted by a combination of artillery and drones. Despite the best efforts of the 47th Mechanized Brigade, a couple days later, on the 10th of July, Yevhenivka fell into enemy hands. That's when Ukrainian resistance stiffened around the settlements of Vovche and Prohres. More on this very important battle in a moment. Meanwhile, the settlement of Novoselivka Persha was like a thorn in the foot of this entire Russian offensive. Even worse for the Russian command, hypothetically. From there, the Ukrainians received magic reinforcements like Gandalf and the Rohirrim. They could still launch a counterattack towards Ocheretine, Avdiivka. In other words, it's not a position you want to leave behind. So, it was decided to terminate Novoselivka Persha. In this drone footage, you can get an aerial view of the village. It's essentially one street with individual homes in ruins on both sides. On the 12th of July, after a general assault on the village, Russian assault squads got their first foothold. They advanced 1.6 km along this road, in this sector as well, and 1.2 km from the east. The next few days, the Russians launched various shaping operations to improve their position south of the village, in order to prepare for the next assault. Engineering units played a key role as they cleared the entire highways across open field to allow armored units to maneuver. But this also makes it easier for Ukrainian artillery to zero in incoming vehicles. For example, in this frame we see an advancing tank that will have to bypass 4 friendly armored vehicles destroyed or abandoned. And in the end, this tank will also join the party because it got blown up by a mine. Keep in mind that if the Russians actually take over this entire territory, all these vehicles will be retrieved and repaired. Whereas every Ukrainian vehicle that is abandoned is a complete write-off. However, it's really the attack of the 16th of July that devastated the rear of the Ukrainian defenders. Here you can see 2 of them that were surrounded in a basement and decided to surrender. 2 days later, the entire northern part of the village was under Russian control. While Russian forces were storming Novoselivka Persha, an important battle took place 6 kilometers to the north. By mid-July, the Ukrainian command hoped that the line Vovche, Lozovatske, Prohres and Vovche would hold. Anyway, these places are way too complicated to pronounce, so let's rename these positions Natalie, Anne, Florence, and Océane. The Nefo line. But don't be fooled, not all of them are massive villages. For example, Lozovatske has only 2 homes. Sadly, this Nefo line crumbled immediately. Position Anne or Lozovatske fell on the 16th of July. In this footage, you can witness a mop-up operation by a Russian BMP along this forested area. 2 days later, the Russians were already knocking on the door of Florence or Prohres. Not only Ukraine didn't build proper defensive positions, but all these huge fields and the lack of cover made it very difficult for them to rotate out military personnel. Like in this video where Max Pro MRAP was destroyed by a Russian drone. I don't want to sound dramatic, but by the 20th of July it was GG well played for Ukraine. In a way, we can even say that the Russians made good progress. Russian Group Center managed to launch a pincer maneuver from these 2 positions and encircled an entire unit of the Ukrainian 31st Mechanized Brigade. You know what? Let's use a Ukrainian account of the story. On Telegram, Tsaplenko wrote, "A number of observation posts of the 1st and 3rd battalions were completely surrounded. The brigade commander never gave the order to break through. Minus 100 aura. Just like at the Zenit base in Avdiivka." Just put yourself in the shoes of these Ukrainian soldiers stuck in this cauldron with enemy forces all around. We don't have more details, but apparently these units managed to organize a breakthrough operation. But the question is, at what cost? While Ukraine was busy with this rescue mission, the Russians captured Prohres on the 20th. It seems the Ukrainian army on the Pokrovsk Front is not only suffering from a lack of manpower, but the real problem comes from a complete lack of brain. Somehow they don't have any competent military commanders on the ground. I don't know, perhaps it's because of chronism, political ideology. Honestly, I don't know. But right now, Russian armor units are rolling right through Ukrainian units, with the worst entrenchments and the weakest, inexperienced brigade commanding staff. In other words, lines led by donkeys. So to all the problems we listed about the Ukrainian army, we can add poor tactical skills during counterattacks. In the end, it's always the 47th Mechanized Brigade that is sent forward to repair the broken pots. Even then, all they could deploy forward to counterattack was a bunch of M1A1 Abrams. I don't have the entire order of battle, but one of them attacked along the train tracks and the other out of this tree line. It's not a surprise that the first one got swarmed and destroyed by Russian drones, whereas the second Lone Wolf Abrams tank was abandoned 1 kilometer from the first one. This seems to have been a crucial part of the Battle of Prohres, because right after this Ukrainian counterattack, no joke, the entire front collapsed. Here's the situation on the 22nd of July, 23rd of July, 800 meters gained here and 1200 meters here. July 24th, Ukraine loses this 1400 meter long tree line. You might think it's not too bad, and boom! 25th of July, Russia unlocked its first reward with a kill streak of 4. Elimination of this pocket, 800 meter push west of Lozovatske, 3 kilometer breakthrough along the train tracks, and the capture of Vovche. Can you guess who stormed the village of Vovche? 3, 2, 1.
Слава черным гусарам! Слава русскому оружию! Победа будет за нами! Враг будет разбит!
For my pro-Ukraine viewers, please put on your seatbelt because you're not ready for what's next. Russian assault detachments expanded once again their positions all around Vovche on the 26th. And same thing the following day. They now controlled 2,300 meters of tree lines in front of Zelane. Within a week, the Russian army advanced 5 kilometers.
Fuck.
Oh, you thought I was done? Not so fast. Due to this Russian breakthrough, the Ukrainian defenders of Novoselivka Persha had to abandon their remaining combat positions. Otherwise, they would have been completely encircled. Immediately after, soldiers of the 114th Motor Rifle Brigade raised their banner on the village they just conquered. By the 28th of July, this Russian attack vector became much thicker. The Ukrainians tried to rectify this with a quick counterattack. This one was a success, but the one in the direction of Lozovatske failed completely. Shortly after having wasted some of their reserves, Ukrainian forces in this sector had to give up some of their positions west of Lozovatske. Keeping the momentum going, the Russians immediately launched an armored attack towards Timofivka. As you can see in this drone footage, this terrain is marked by dense vegetation compared to the other areas. Here we see a unit of 2 tanks. One of them got targeted by Ukrainian drone operators. Can you guess how many drones they flew out to destroy this one tank? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Hats off to this Russian tank commander. He did everything he could have done. After the first strike, he escaped as fast as possible while trying to take cover in some forested area to be camouflaged from all the drones. By the 31st of July, Timofivka was kaput, and the Russians skillfully captured 7 tree lines that will act as spearheads for the next assaults. We can think of these tree lines like some attack trenches, where storm detachments can regroup as close as possible to enemy positions before launching the general attack. Overall, this makes it very difficult for the Ukrainian command to guess the main enemy axis of attack. The Russians could attack here, here, or even here. or all 7 at the same time. Such tactics are deadly against a defender that is already stretched thin and struggling with a lack of manpower. Meanwhile, Russian artillery also bombarded all possible objectives to maintain this fog of war, all the while destroying enemy positions. It's not a surprise that the next day on August 1st, I don't know how to put it, Russian assault detachments stormed Vesely, captured the southern part of Yevhenivka, and continued their offensive along the train tracks between Serhivka and Zhelany. It seems the railway line provided Russian infantry squads with proper cover, where they could also conveniently dig in. Now, what made the Ukraine command extremely worried is that somehow more and more Russian units poured into this breakthrough. This Ukrainian soldier from the Aidar battalion wrote on his telegram, "I have the impression that they were released like ants." In a way, he's not wrong. In this video, you can see a platoon of 26 Russian soldiers walking in column formation along this tree line. Moments later, they scatter as they're targeted by Ukrainian artillery. This unit was actually ambushed 4 kilometers behind the front as it was going towards the contact line. This makes me believe there must have been countless such platoons just creeping their way forward. Everything became clearer with the following report. It's no longer a secret that the 27th Division has additionally entered the Pokrovsk direction. That's right, the Russians committed 2 additional motor rifle regiments, the 506th and 589th. These fresh reserves play a crucial role to keep the momentum going of this offensive. How did the Russian command manage to transfer so many of its reserves forward without being intercepted? That's something worth to be studied. By the 4th of August, Zhelany was semi-encircled. As enemy forces tightened their grip on the settlement, it's just a matter of time before it falls. As of August 7, Zhelany is almost under full Russian control. There are only mop-up operations at the moment, but what is astonishing is how Vesely and Serhivka have both fallen as well. Serhivka was stormed by men of the 433rd Motorized Rifle Regiment, who also proudly displayed this US-made M88A2 Hercules armored recovery vehicle they captured. You will also notice that from an operational perspective, within a month, the Russian armed forces managed to completely outflank Ukraine's defensive positions along the Vovcha river. In the end, what can we expect from the Pokrovsk Front in the coming days and weeks? The town of Pokrovsk is defended by 4 urban areas on the outskirts, namely Mirnohrad, Hrodivka, Novohrodivka, and Selidove. This outside layer has to be defended at all costs, because if the Russians capture one of these towns, they will be able to use it as a coordination center to regroup all their reserves and supplies, just like they did with Ocheretine. Now, what can we expect in the coming days and weeks? I think the Russians will go for a brute force attack against Pokrovsk. Since Russian assault detachments progressed so well along the railway line, we can expect the same general strategy. On a tactical level, from their new positions, we can expect a first grouping to push towards Novohrodivka, where they will have to break through the line of villages of Zhurevka, Orlivka, and Mykolaivka. Simultaneously, a second grouping could push northwards via Serhivka, Vesely, and Yevhenivka in order to storm Hrodivka from all directions, especially since they can easily infiltrate squads of riflemen along these forested areas that lead straight inside Hrodivka. That's all I have for you today. Let me know in the comment section what you thought of my analysis. If you're new to this channel, make sure to like and subscribe. And if you want to support my work, make sure to check out my Patreon or PayPal. The link is in the description below.